I have one person. I'm live. Oh yes, I'm live. Behave now. Shabbat shalom. So we today, Shabbat service number 3, which is on page 117 in your prayer books. Please stand. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom also to Michelle and to Deborah who have joined us today online. And of course, as usual, all the names I can't see on my phone. So Shabbat shalom, and thank you for being so loyal to the synagogue. We're on page 117. We thank you, O God, for this new day, for morning sun and evening star, for flowering of tree and flowing of tide, for life-giving rains and cooling breezes, for the changing seasons, for the cycle of growth and decay, of life and death. We awake and behold a new day. O God, renew us unto life. Teach us to recognize your presence in creation. Grateful for your gifts, may we dedicate all our powers to your service. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokei העברים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish הרומim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa li kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten laya'ef koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam המעביר שינה מעיניי ותנומה מעפעפיי. ברוך שאמר והיה העולם ברוך הוא. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המהולל בפי עמו, משובח ומפואר בלשון חסידיו ועבדיו. בשברות ובזמירות נגדלך ונמליך מלכנו יחיד חי העולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מהולל בתשבחות. With the coming of day and night, I will enter the covenant of God, and when evening and morning depart, I will recite God's decrees. God Most High, you are my righteousness. You teach me goodness. You are the fountain of knowledge, the dwelling place of holiness, and the summit of glory. Eternal might and majesty are yours. I will choose whatever you teach me, gladly accepting your judgments. As soon as I move my hands and feet, I will praise your name when I go out and when I come in, when I lie down and when I rise up. When I rest on my bed, I will sing your praise, and in the company of my friends, I will praise you with the words of my mouth. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי שימרתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך ארנה. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד המקום מחשבותיך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. Please turn to page 135 for Yishtabach, 135. And stand. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, ההל המלך הגדול והקדוש, בשמיים ובארץ. כי לך נא אדוני אלוהינו, ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שיר ושבחה, הלל וזמחה, ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בשירי זמרה. לילה 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 ברכו את אדוני לעולם ועד. We're on page 136. We praise you, Eternal One, our God, sovereign of the universe, maker of light and creator of darkness, author of peace and creator of all things. In your mercy you give light to the earth and all who live on it, and in your goodness you renew creation continually day by day. How manifold are your works, O God! With wisdom have you made them all. The world is full of your creations. Your handiwork proclaims your praise. The radiant stars bear witness to your glory. We praise you, O God, creator of light. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truth of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching. Make us faithful to your commandments and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you. Please stand. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשרבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אמת. Please be seated. Good and beautiful and true, sound, established and enduring are these words now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
Da
Hashem, Felem, Noam, Tehilot, Rosem, Felem. שיחה חדשה, שיברו גלויים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, גל ישראל, גל ישראל, ישראל. Viamidas on page 140. Is it me or there's an echo in the... There's an echo, so... Okay, if I speak like this, can you still hear me online? Sorry?
I think, I'm not sure if this is on, which might be causing a bit of feedback.
Because it comes back, huh?
This is on, but I'm not sure how to turn it off, but this might be causing feedback.
Okay, let's try. No, is there an echo now? It's better. Brilliant. So now we can continue our service with Yamida on page 140.
I mean, it's just like in the days of old when they had to worry about feedback from outside.
Yes. Adonai שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. Eternal God, open my lips, let my mouth may declare your praise. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכה חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים, אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לי שינה יפה. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיע ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה המתים. קדושה. לקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ, כבודו. אדיר אדירנו, אדוני אדוננו, מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני אלוהיו, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושבתך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, יהיה לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Please be seated. On page 142, you inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. When upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good. ישמחו במלכותך, ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת וקוראי עונג. המקדשי שביעי, המקדשי שביעי, כולם ישמעו וינתנגו מטובך. והשביעי, והשביעי, רצית בו וקידשתו. חמדת ימים, חמדת ימים, אותו קראת, זכר למעשה וראשית. Our God and God of ancestors, may our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Sanctify us by your commandments and make us loyal to your teaching. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, eternal one, let the holiness of your Sabbath enter our hearts. May all Israel who hallow your name be exalted by its peace. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. And we continue silently via Mida on page 144 and 145, and we come back together on page 146. Words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Iyu leratzon imrefi, vegion libi lefanecha, Adonai tzuri, Adonai tzuri, vegoali yu leratzon imrefi, vegion libi lefanecha, Adonai tzuri, Adonai tzuri, vegoali se shalom bimromav, se shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel ve'al kol bnei Adam. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol bnei Adam. Is it high? Gosh, no. I'm keeping my voice for tonight, huh? So yesterday, Vince forgot his capo. So then we had all, different keys. It was, oh gosh. But we went through it. Yeah, it worked. Yes, it worked. Now we are reaching the part of the service that is very specific to Shabbat and Monday and Thursday, which is the Seder Kriyat HaTorah, the order of reading from the Torah scroll. So my favorite questions to the community is, which parashat are we in now? Not people who came yesterday, because you heard all about it, but which parashat HaShavua are we in? You know that you were supposed to read Torah every day of the year, to study Torah every day. Okay, let's get some help. It comes after Balak. Very good. So Balak, it's another name that is very unusual, Pinchas. And these two Torah portions are actually very much connected, because there is, normally you've got, between two Torah portions, you have a break which is quite significant or makes sense, but between Balak and Pinchas it doesn't really make sense, because what happens in Parashat Balak continues in Parashat Pinchas, and I'm going to explain you a bit more. And I think it's very appropriate to talk about Pinchas today, because today we will mark the 28th anniversary of the events that happened in Bosnia and Srebrenica, because there is a UK charity called Remembering Srebrenica, and every year they ask Jewish communities around the country to remember what happened to these 8,000 men and boys who were killed by the Serbian forces in an act of genocide. And I will talk to you a bit about the historical context, and also I will read you a testimony of a woman who survived these terrible events in 95. So in July 95 it started, on the 11th of July 95. So this parasha talks about violence, and violence in the name of God, and of course there are other violences, but not always the name of God. Here it's not in the name of God, mind you. There's always it's the name of politics and greed. And okay, so page 481. Craig, can I ask you to be the scroll bearer, taking it out and in, back, and can I ask Dominique and maybe Mary to be the dresser of the scroll? Okay, you happy with that? Brilliant. Page 481, En kamocha va'Elohim Adonai, ve'en kema'asecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'ador. Please stand. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimlo, leolam va'ed. Adonai oz ve'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Gadolu l'Adonai iti, u'nechomama Shemo yachtav. Lecha Adonai הגדולה והגבורה והתפארת והנצח וההוד, ככל בשמיים ובארץ, ככל בשמיים ובארץ. לך אדוני הממלכה והמתנשא לכל לראש. Thank you. Please be seated. Right, so we need a bit of context here, and I will read the story that happened in a previous chapter. And so we are in the book of Numbers, and I will just read the first 5 verses of Parashat Pinchas. But before that, I want to explain what happened before in Parashat Balak, which is the previous one. It's always kind of strange, some of these stories are really, really, really strange. But, otherwise it would be boring, if everything was straightforward. Okay. So, of course, God is angry, of course, as very often in the book of Numbers. So Israel was staying at a place called Shittim. The people profaned themselves by warring with the Moabite women. So Moab is a people that lives on the other side of the Jordan, people where we are supposed to have no interaction with at all. But of course, they did. And the Hebrew here is very clear, is liznot, zona is a prostitute. They prostituted themselves. So they invited the people to the sacrifices for their God. The people partook of them and worshipped that God. So which is the arch sin in Torah. Idolatry is really something that you're liable by death. So thus Israel attached itself to Baal Peor, which was the local god, and the Eternal was incensed with Israel. The Eternal said to Moses, "Take all the ringleaders and have them publicly impaled before the Eternal." So he's really, really angry. So that the Eternal's wrath may turn away from Israel. So Moses said to Israel's officials, "Each of you slay those of his men who attach themselves to Baal Peor." And then we have what happened, this very strange episode. Just when one of the Israelites came and brought a Midianite woman over to his companions in the sight of Moses and of the whole Israelite community, who were weeping at the entrance of the tent of the meeting. When Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, and taking a spear in his hand, he followed the Israelite into the chamber and stabbed both of them, the Israelite and the woman, through the belly. Then the plague against the Israelites was checked. Those who died of the plague numbered 24,000. So this episode of this Israelite man bringing a Midianite woman, going into the tent of a meeting, having sex there, which shouldn't be doing that. You can imagine people having sex in the synagogue. It's kind of, it's yeah.
No, thanks.
It's in itself, it's not a profanation because the synagogue is not a sacred space. It's not.
It's okay.
You do with your life whatever you want, of course, but it's not appropriate. Definitely not appropriate. But here we have, a couple going into the tent of a meeting and having sex there, and Pinchas, who is the grandson of Aaron the priest, he was so furious. He took a spear in his hand, he followed both of them, and he stabbed them through the belly. And then God was happy. So it's kind of a weird deity, right? And this is the end of last week's parasha. And in this week's parasha, and what I'm going to read to you now, the Eternal spoke to Moses, saying, "Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the Israelites by displaying among them his passion for me, so that I did not wipe out the Israelite people in my passion. Say, therefore, I grant him my pact of friendship." Brit Shalom. Brit Shalom. So it's not a pact of friendship, it's a covenant of peace. "It shall be for him and his descendants after him, a part of priesthood for all time. So not only God condones what's happened, but God gives, Pinchas a confirmation that he and his descendants will be the priest of the people of Israel. So it's kind of a very strange episode about violence in the name of God condoned by God himself. Because Pinchas took impassioned action for his God, thus making expiation for the Israelites. And then we have the name of the two people involved. The name of the Israelite who was killed, the one who was killed with a Midianite woman, was Zimri, son of Salu, chieftain of a Simeonite ancestral house. And the name of the Midianite woman who was killed was Cosbi, daughter of Tzur. He was a tribal head of an ancestral house in Midian. So in other words, these two people were not commoners. They were not royalty. It's not right, but they were among a kind of nobility in both their people. So yesterday we talked about this notion of violence, religious violence, and I brought a commentary of someone. I don't have my notes, sorry. We said that actually when God says, Brit Shalom, I will give him Brit Shalom, is a way to say to Pinchas, okay, you've done it once, but it's not appropriate. And there's a whole discussion in the Talmud about this very passage where the rabbi said, of course it's God seems to condone what happened, but we can't. If someone has a grudge against someone else, you don't take justice in your hands. You have to go through a process, because the rabbis were very much, process-oriented people with rabbinic courts, and when something happened, you had to go through the rabbis and discuss the case, and this is absolutely not acceptable in the Jewish tradition. Okay, we're going to do a communal aliyah today, so if you stand please on page 482. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך, לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני, נותן התורה. Amen. Please be seated. Amen. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, פנחס בן אלעזר בן אהרון הכהן, השיב את חמתי מעל בני ישראל, בקנאו את קנאתי בתוכם, ולא כיליתי את בני ישראל בקנאתי. לכן אמור, הנני נותן לו את בריתי שלום, והייתה לו ולזרעו אחריו ברית כהונת עולם, תחת אשר קינא לאלוהיו, ויכפר על בני ישראל, ושם איש ישראל המוכה, אשר הוכה את המדיינית, זמרי בן סולה, נשיא ביתיו לשמעוני, ושם האישה המוכה, המדיינית כוזבי בת צור, ראש ומות ביתיו במדיין הוא. Please stand. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet v'chaye olam, nata betocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל, על פי אדוני ביד משה. Please be seated. So, for the Haftarah for Pinchas is taken from the first book of Kings, chapter 18, verse 46 to 19, verse 21. So the blessing is on page 483. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, אשר בחר בנביאים טובים ורצה בדבריהם לנאמרים באמת. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בתורה ובמשה עבדו ובישראל עמו ובנביאי האמת והצדק. So, you know, there is a connection in the Jewish tradition between Pinchas and Elijah the prophet, and this is what happens. There's a very interesting ending of the story which we usually talk about on Yom Kippur. So the hand of the Eternal had come upon Elijah. He tied up his skirts and ran in front of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. When Ahab told Jezebel what Elijah had done and how he had put all the prophets to the sword, Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "Thus and more may the gods do, if by this time tomorrow I have not made you like one of them." Frightened, he fled at once for his life. He came to Beersheba, which is in Judah, and left his servant there. He himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush and sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. "Enough," he cried. "Now, O Eternal, take my life, for I'm no better than my fathers." So there was a context between the priest of Baal and Elijah, and Elijah won a battle against 400 priests, and he killed all of them. So, and of course, Jezebel, who is the archetype of a bad woman in the Bible, sometimes I like to call my friends Jezebel, because I think sometimes it still works. She threatens to kill him, and of course he's afraid, and he fled and he hid somewhere. So then the word of the Eternal came to Elijah. He said to him, "Why are you here, Elijah?" He replied, "I am moved by zeal for the Eternal, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life. Come out," God called, "and stand on the mountain before the Eternal." And this is a passage which we read, we don't read it, we allude to in the Unetane Tokef, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. "And the Eternal passed by. There was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks by the power of the Eternal. but the eternal was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the eternal was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire, but the eternal was not in the fire. And after the fire, a soft murmuring sound. Kol demama yaka. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his mantle about his face and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then a voice addressed him, "Why are you here, Elijah?" He answered, "I am moved by the eternal, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and have put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life." The repetition is in the Torah, in the Bible, it's not me. The Eternal said to him, "Go back the way you came, and on the wilderness of Damascus, when you get there, anoint Hazael, a skin of Aram," etc., etc. So the most important passage of this, and the connection, and what makes actually these stories acceptable is this idea that God was not in the wind, God was not in the earthquake, God was not in the fire, but God was a soft murmuring sound. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שבכל דבריו אמת וצדק. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה, אדוני, מקדש השבת. Amen. Page 484, please stand. Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our sovereign King Charles and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of our responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity. Eternal God, as you blessed our ancestors in generations past, bless now this congregation, its leaders and its members, and all who enter this synagogue to meet, to study, and to pray. Comfort the sorrowing hearts among us, and heal those in anxiety or pain. May we all find here community and friendship, renew what a purpose and hope, a deeper understanding of our heritage, and a sense of your abiding presence. Bless all the congregations of the House of Israel throughout the world. Let those who live under oppressive rule soon be freed, and may we all unite to witness to your truth and do your will. Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbors, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. We are on page 486. יהללו את שם אדוני כי נשגב שמו לבדו. הודו על ארץ ושמיים וירם כרם לעמו תהילה לכל חסידיו לבני ישראל עם קרובו. הללויה הללויה. דקתו נתתי לכם, תורתי אל תעזובו, עצים היא למחזיקים בה, ותומכי המאושר, דרכי ידכי נועם, בכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם, חדש ימינו כקדם, חדש ימינו כקדם. Oops. Thank you. Please be seated. So today, 20 years ago, not far from here, it's a couple of hours flight. It's really not the other side of the world. Something that, I don't know if you remember the footage of the camps in Bosnia. All these men that really looked like people in Auschwitz or in the Nazi camps. They were so thin, you could only see the bones on the skin. So a bit of context, on the 11th of July 1995, Bosnian Serb forces led by General Ratko, my Serbian is not great, but I think it's pronounced Ratko Mladic, overrun and captures the town of Srebrenica in eastern Bosnia, which had been declared a UN safe area. In the days following, more than 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys were systematically murdered and buried in mass graves. Thousands of women, children, and the elderly were forcibly deported. Srebrenica was a culmination of a campaign of ethnic cleansing used by Bosnian Serb forces during the conflict. This was implemented to achieve the aim of a greater Serbia free from non-Serbs. So that rings a bell. It's not something new. Throughout Bosnia, between 20,000 to 50,000 women and girls suffered sexual violence, a weapon of war used to systematically ethnically cleanse the region and terrorize the populace. Concentration camps were established in the Prijedor area, and many Bosnian Muslims were forced from their homes to be internally displaced or become refugees. Described by the United Nations as the worst crime on European soil since the Second World War, the genocide at Srebrenica was officially recognized by International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia at The Hague. Yet denial of this atrocity remains widespread against nothing new. It's always the same mechanism. Many in Bosnia and Herzegovina are still struggling for justice. Among these are organizations as the Mothers of Srebrenica, who campaign for the recognition of the death of their loved ones, and the Association of Women Victims of War, who campaign for justice for survivors of sexual violence, who still fight stigma within Bosnia. On the 11th July, the official date of remembrance, each year we honor the victims and survivors of genocide and pledge ourselves to creating a better, stronger, and more cohesive society in the United Kingdom. The lessons we learn from Srebrenica are that hatred and intolerance can flourish if left unchallenged. So we're talking about something that happened 50 years after the war, and most of the people alive at that time were already alive during the war. And this can change very quickly, so we should never be complacent. So there is, in the material that was given by this charity, Remembering Srebrenica, I read part of what they said. There is a testimony. Again, I don't speak Serbian, but I think it's Nura Begovic. So she said, I was born in the village of Rizici in the municipality of Srebrenica. Before the war started, we had a wonderful life. For many years before the war, me and my husband Hamed had worked together at the Srebrenica Transport Company and built our own house, which we lived in with our 2 daughters. During the war in 1993, I was injured by shrapnel and evacuated on a convoy to Tuzla. I was able to take my children with me because they were girls, but my husband had to stay behind. No wounded men or boys were supposed to be on the convoy, let alone a male that was healthy. It was a difficult journey to Tuzla. We passed through checkpoints run by Serb police officers who asked us if there was anyone on board who was from Srebrenica. No one dared to admit that they were. A few men had managed to get on the convoy and were taken away by Serb police officers. People were screaming and crying in fear. It was simply horrendous. When we arrived in Tuzla, we had no place to stay. We had left behind our home and our family. We managed to find shelter with another family in a student dormitory, which was being used as a refugee center. There was no food, medicine, or electricity, but we had a roof over our heads. I managed to keep in touch with my husband through messages and radio, and I kept telling him, it will get better. Both mine and my husband's parents had stayed in Srebrenica. My father died of starvation. He was sick and unable to get the medication he needed. My mother-in-law was killed by a shell as she went to fetch water. My father-in-law was killed in 1995 at the warehouse in Kravica. His remains were later found in a mass grave in Glogova. The same happened to my brother. His remains were found near Kravica, and we buried him at the Memorial Center in Potocari in 2019. My brother was 42 years old and he was married and had 2 children. At the start of the war, his wife and children left for Macedonia. He tried to escape Srebrenica with my husband. They left through the forest heading towards Tuzla. They were attacked by Serb forces in the forest and were separated. My husband survived, but my brother did not. So as we said yesterday, we talked about violence. We talked about violence in Torah. We talked about violence motivated by religion, but there's also violence motivated by politics, which was obviously the case. Violence motivated by nationalism, which I remember in 1996, President François Mitterrand, the French president, he died a year later, he went to the European Parliament and he said something which really stayed in my head. He said, nationalism is war. And I think he really touched something very important, you know, when we have it's okay to be proud of the country in which we live and the country where we grew up, and to have a sense of pride, you know, in what our country has achieved. And, you know, I have 2 passports, you know that. So I'm proud of both my countries, my birth countries, my adopted countries. But my understanding of pride doesn't exclude others. And I think this is where, when we start by having this pride that makes divisions among humanity, then when we reach to this point where, I mean, these people live together, they intermarried, they were neighbors, they were friends, they were husband and wives, and suddenly, because some of them were Muslims, they were not allowed to live anymore. And they really targeted men, and not women and girls. But women and girls were used, sadly, for another use. So today we remember that, we remember Srebrenica, and I don't know what more to say, because we're, sorry? Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, and so tonight we have a concert here. which is also, I think, a way to remember the plight of the Jewish people, with generation to generation, with this charity that gives the voice to the second and third generation of survivors. And we see the same happening everywhere. You know, the first generation, for many decades, they didn't want to talk about it. You know, they kept it a secret. And of course, when you keep such a huge secret in your life, it has an impact on your children, your grandchildren, because, you know, it's if you don't address, if you don't face our demons, we transmit them in a way or another. So the second generation of survivors, they really suffered, not in the same way as their parents, but, you know, by the silence, and you know, these people were tough after what they went through.
And René, can I just add something?
Sure.
There's a real connection there, because one of the themes of tonight's concert is the narrative and the first person narrative, so it's people telling their stories about what happened to their aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. But what you just did in the sermon was obviously, you know, tell a story from someone from Srebrenica, so there's a real overlap between your sermon this morning and what you're doing tonight.
And it's the same story. You know, you just change the names and the location, and you have the same suffering, the same. And you know, 8,000 men and boys from one. Can you imagine 8,000? Srebrenica is the size of Kingston. Right? It's quite a small town. Can you imagine you would take 8,000, half of the population? Right? It's huge. So we usually recite Psalm 23, Adonai Ro'i, and we will sing it. We will sing it today in memory of these people, and also the people we remember tonight. I'm going to get close to the music. Adonai Ro'i lo echsam b'leot desheyabitzeni al mei menuchot al So now it's time to say the Kaddish. And on this Shabbat, which Shabbat are we continuing the day? 8, yes. So we remember Meyer Schreibman, the grandfather of Anna Sanderson. We remember Tom Johnson, the father of Tina Higgins. We remember Raymond Benjamin, the son of Edmund and Evelyn Benjamin, and twin brother of Samuel. And we remember Sigmund Ortner, the father of Barbara Richards. Is there any name you'd like to remember? And of course, the 8,000 victims of Srebrenica. Do you have any other names you'd like? Yes?
My father, who's stone setting tomorrow.
Oh, your father's stone setting tomorrow. Oh, Rabbi strength. So, Zichronam Livracha, may the memory be a blessing, and may the memory bring us happy memories and good moments. And we turn to page 524. 524. And we say together, please stand. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתבהר וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ביכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים וכל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל בני אדם ואמרו אמן. Okay, please be seated for one last time, and we are going to sing Ma Yafeh Hayom. How beautiful is this day, Shabbat Shalom. Ma Yafeh Hayom, Shabbat Shalom. Ma Yafeh Hayom, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Ma Yafeh Hayom, Shabbat Shalom. Ma Yafeh Hayom, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. So before we finish our service, Dominic will say a few words.
Oh, I have to say a few words as well.
Yeah, just a few.
Right, well, a year and a half ago, René asked me to take over on his biblical Hebrew course, and maybe the students regret that because I made them work. But we went through the whole course. They've learned all about the verbal Hebrew system, which is very complicated.
Yes.
And those who have completed the course will now get a certificate. Craig? There you are. Very well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Rebecca?
I will watch the last one as well. Thank you. I will do.
really
The
hard.
other three are here.
Yeah, so yeah, I will send. Yeah, okay. Okay, let's go in the next room for the Kiddush, and thank you for all of you who came online today. And I hope that some of you will come tonight to the concert.
Oh, sorry, can I just ask if anyone can please stay behind after the service and just help with some setting up in here, preferably if you're able to lift some things. That would be really wonderful, thank you so much. Talk to